begin, what a beautiful background. It makes me feel very traditional in this space. As we get into this semester, I've been praying about what I could possibly say to you on this first night, because it's not the first day of school, but it is the first day of the spring semester. It is the first day of a new year, or the first worship time of a new year. And while I could do things like New Year's resolutions and stuff like that, that just is like, who does New Year's resolutions these days because they're made to be broken, that sort of thing. And like, I always set out on the New Year's, like I'm going to do these things, I'm going to like get up at 5 a.m., all this kind of stuff, and then it's like, life happens. Also, it's so cold and so dark, who wants to start anything new during this time? Like springtime is the time to make changes in your life. This is the dark time, okay? So it's like, we're just trying to make it. But as I was thinking through, I just kept on coming back to one passage. It was Philippians chapter 2. Philippians chapter 2 is a well-known passage. You've heard it before. But tonight I hope that you'll hear it in new lights, in a new way, and in a personal way that may change everything about this semester for you. And I want to begin by simply asking you this question. How does it feel when you disappoint others? I mean, the obvious answer is bad. Nobody likes that, right? But how does it make you feel when you disappoint someone else's or fail to meet someone else's expectations of you? The dreams that they have for you, the hope, the expectations they had for you as their friend. And you, for whatever reason, were not able to fulfill that obligation. In some ways you feel like, did I betray them? Or like, was it an unfair expectation to begin with? And so we go into this whole cognitive dissonance thing. So we're going to learn a little bit from Jesus on that tonight. Because I hope that instead of listening to the outside voices of what so-and-so wants for you in your life, what your major demands of your life, maybe even what you demand of your life, and dare I say, even our families sometimes. My mom wanted me to be a lawyer. I interned one day with my uncle, and I was like, this sucks. I do not want to do this. I was like, moving papers from one room to the next. I was a runner. That's what they called me. I was like, that ain't for me. And I hear these stories from students all the time, but what is it like when you just don't meet the expectations? Philippians chapter 2. Kind of heaps it on, but stay with me. It says, verse 3, do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit. Rather, in humility, value others above yourselves, not looking to your own interests, but each of you to the interests of the others. Now, this verse, or these couple of verses, could heap on the expectation and obligation. It's like, well, I can't break the obligation that I have to other people because I'm supposed to put their interests before mine, right? These verses are always used like that. It's like, well, I have to lay aside my ambitions. I have to lay aside the plans that I have for my life to appease what these other people want. I have to set aside my own needs for the needs of my friend. And there is something to that, for sure. Jesus said there's two greatest commandments, right? The first greatest commandment is love the Lord your God with all your heart, your mind, your soul, and your strength. The second one is like it. Love your neighbor as you love yourself. And the caveat to that a lot of people don't really think much about is that it's hard to love your neighbor as you love yourself when you really don't have a lot of love for yourself. I'm going to say that again. It's hard to love your neighbor as yourself when you don't have a lot of love for yourself. The first and greatest commandment is about getting that right relationship with God so that your soul need is taken care of first, because how can you truly love someone else when you haven't taken care of that? Loving God is, in a lot of ways, taking care of your own soul and your heart, and you have to love yourself a little bit in order to do that. And to the degree that you're able to be unveiled and unleashed in love, that's the kind of love you can give to the world around you. And so it's in that sort of spirit, I think, that Paul is speaking to the Philippians when he says, don't do anything out of selfish ambition or vain conceit. Rather, in humility, value others above yourself. not looking to your own interests, but each of you to the interests of the others. In your relationships, listen to this, have the same mindset as Christ Jesus. And this is like almost like a creed that they had, one of the earliest creeds of the church. It says, who being in very nature God, didn't consider equality with God something to be used to his own advantage. What does that mean? Well, it means that he's Jesus, fully God, fully man, and he didn't see it fit to exploit that strength. Can you imagine Jesus going around doing things that God could do all the time? Yes, he did miracles and he did healings and he even rose from the dead, but he didn't do it all the time. There was a little bit of restraint. He also didn't show up saying, hello, I'm God, listen to me. I mean, he could have. I mean, he's the one who could say that. A lot of people go around speaking as though they are the voice of God. Jesus is the voice of God, and yet he didn't exploit that among people. He invited them, but he still gave them a choice. He still gave them the choice to choose to follow him or not. And that's a really tricky thing. Because when people keep their expectations on us, or if they're not doing exactly what we want them to do, or responding or reacting in the way that we want them to respond or react, what do? We try to play damage control. At least I do. It's like, okay, well, how can I make this right? How can I appease what they are feeling, this anxiety and angst that they are feeling, while also dealing with what's going on in me? And a lot of times, we just conform to what they want. But what if what they want isn't necessarily true to what God wants in you? For me, it's a lot easier to make up to God than to make up with people that I see or talk to every day of my life. And so what the temptation is, well, I'll just put this idea and hope and plan that God has for my life on the side because it's safer and easier to appease these dreams and wishes over here. What ends up happening is that we start living someone else's plan for our life, for our friendships, for our majors, rather than the one that God had birthed in us. I know that this hits a lot of students because we deal with expectations during this time in our lives. We deal with, okay, so what are the expectations of my college, of my parents, of my siblings, of my relationships and friendships? How do I manage all of these things? And in the midst of that, how am I listening to God? Because these voices are super loud around me. How do I create peace there? Jesus, Philippians continues, says, instead made himself nothing by taking the very nature of a servant, being made in human likeness and being found in appearance as a man, he humbled himself by becoming obedient to death, even death on a cross. This is not a hopeful answer, because when Jesus disappointed people, what happened? They crucified him. And you know what's crazy? He let them. He had all the power of God. He could have called upon his godly Jesus powers, lifted up the cross himself and whacked them all with it and said, smite you sinners. He didn't. Though he had every right to, because he's God. Yet he didn't. So what does that tell us about disappointing people? On Monday, as is my custom, after I read my Bible, I do the most holy thing. And after praying for each one of you by name, I turn on the Today Show. And on Monday, on the Today Show, there was a really fascinating interview. An author, and a podcaster, and just this speaker has kind of taken on a viral sort of message. I want to show you that interview right now, and then we'll talk about it.
37. You guys, I'm so excited because in our studio is one of my very favorites, award-winning podcast host, best-selling author, Mel Robbins. Mel is one of the most followed and sought-after experts in mindset, behavior change, and life improvement. Winner Video, it's a video that you guys have maybe seen. It's the Let Them video, the theory. It went viral. She knew she had to figure out why this concept was touching so many people. So here's what she did. People got tattoos. She wrote a book. She wrote a book, and it's called The Let Them Theory. It's a life-changing tool that millions of people cannot stop talking about. Mel, I feel like I've known you for a while. You are on a rocket ship that is flying,
Yes.
and this book is like the fuel. Something happened with this book that was magic in a bottle.
Yes.
That comes every now and then. What is it about two simple words that have done this?
Well, the two simple words are let them. And I think the reason why this is a magical concept and the book has taken off, Hoda, is because we're living in a moment of time where people feel like there's so much that's out of their control. Whether they're feeling anxious or they look at the headlines or, they're worried about the economy or their job. And the message with the let them theory is that no matter what's going on outside of you, the power is always inside of you. And
Okay.
so two simple words, let them, are the key to helping you to see what's in your control and what's not in your control. And I think that this is the message that is giving people power and peace and confidence at this exact moment in
Well,
time.
it's #1 everywhere. Oprah said it's her favorite self-help book. There's a million accolades it's gotten. So I'm in a car and I get cut off, and
Yeah.
I'm mad because I'm mad. So how does your theory work? Help us out.
So it's really simple. Anytime you feel stressed or annoyed or frustrated, just say let them. And you immediately feel your shoulders drop. And it's almost like you're allowing something without allowing it. And why this works is because it actually has roots in things that people have cared about for a long time. Stoicism, the serenity prayer, Buddhism, detachment theory, radical acceptance.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
when you say let them, you're actually taking all of that power and wisdom and applying it as a tool in modern life. But then there's a second part, Hoda, that's
that?
really important. You got to say, let me.
Let me.
Let me.
So what's that part? Tell me.
Let me is the most important part, because let me is when you remind yourself, let me remind myself that I always have power. Let me remind myself that my thoughts are in my control. My actions are in my control. How I process my feelings are in my control. Let me remind myself that no matter what's happening out there, I get to choose what's worth my time. I get to choose what's worth my energy. I get to choose whether I leave this meeting or this relationship or this conversation or this text chain. And so I have power, and that's why this has exploded.
I feel like what works with you is things happen organically. You don't plan out
No.
like what's a new theory. This thing came with you, your daughter.
Yes.
Explain the
Yes.
genesis of it.
So I was being a micromanaging freak at my son's prom, trying to force him to give somebody a corsage,
Yeah.
trying to force what he's. And my daughter Kendall, who was home from college, was like, "Mom,
Yeah.
you're being annoying.
Yeah.
Let them do what they want. Let them. It's their prom,
Yeah.
not yours."
Yeah.
And there was something about her
How
going,
she said
"Let them,
that.
let them,
Yeah.
let them." That I thought, wait a minute, why am I trying to control this?
Yeah.
And what we learned in researching this book, Hoda, is that anytime you try to control another person
Yeah.
or something happening that's outside of your control, you just create stress and frustration
Yeah.
for yourself.
Yeah.
And so one of the other reasons why this has exploded and so many people are getting let them and let me tattoos is because every time you say let them, you're also recognizing that your time and energy is worth protecting. So if you're stressed out, if you're tired, if you feel overwhelmed in life, if you feel like you're last on your list, I got news for you. The problem isn't you. The problem is all the power you give to other people
That's it.
and their drama.
That's it.
And their issues in life. And you're taking it on. And so when you say let them, you draw a boundary between yourself and somebody else's mood, yourself and somebody else's happiness. And then you say let me remind myself that my life is my responsibility. And let's talk about the word responsibility. Responsibility is the ability to respond.
Oh.
And right now in life,
Yeah.
we're all reacting and saying let them and let me. You now control your response, which is where your power is.
Your show's on Sirius XM.
Yep.
People are getting tattoos with your book title on it. Let them. How does it feel to be in this space? I mean, you sat with Oprah. Like, you've gone to this next sort
Yeah.
of level.
Yeah. What I'm most proud of is, as a 56-year-old woman, to be one of the top-ranked podcast hosts in the world.
Let's go.
To be number one on Audible, number one on Amazon, number one on the New York Times, number one in the Times UK. Around the world, we've sold 600,000 copies of this book in 2 weeks. And my story is very simple. If I can go from facing bankruptcy and alcoholism and nearly getting divorced at the age of 41 to writing a book, changing my life, getting control of my anxiety, saving my marriage, you can too.
Boy, let me tell you.
You can too. And so I feel so ready for this moment because I believe in the limitless possibility that every person has to live a better life. And so if through my example of turning my own life around and sharing very simple things that you can do to improve your relationships in your life, I hope that you see the possibility in your life too.
I feel like crying. Your daughter's here? Where's your
Yes,
daughter?
Sawyer.
Where's Sawyer? Sawyer, you rock, man. I'm so glad you said that to your mom and she got on your nerves. I mean, if that hadn't happened, you must be so proud of her, huh?
Oh my gosh, I am so proud of her. Like, she deserves all the recognition and more.
Oh, and we wrote the book together.
Together. Yeah, you guys,
and it
yeah.
saved our relationship. It did. I mean, what it taught Sawyer and I is that, and there we are at the kitchen table, we nearly killed each other doing it, is that it taught us to learn how to love each other for who we are and who we're not. Because when you say let them with your mother or your kids,
Yeah.
you're actually learning to love them as they are. And then when you say let me, you recognize that your relationship with your mom or your relationship with your daughter is your responsibility, not theirs.
You rock.
I love you.
I love you
I'm
too.
so
Proud of you.
Sawyer, we
So
love
proud of
you. You're
Love you
awesome.
too.
Thank you.
All right. Get that book, y'all, because there aren't that many copies left. It's called The Let Them Theory. You can find it on our website today or today.com/books or wherever you get your books. I'm so proud of you too,
Proud
Mel.
of you too.
Hey, thanks for watching. Don't miss the Today Show every weekday.
Al,
at 11
turn it over.
Eastern, 8 Pacific on our streaming channel. Today all day.
All right, thank you, Al. Now we sit in darkness. Can we give it up for Charles, the one-man show back here? Pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. Thank you. But no, I love that interview because it really gets to the heart of one of the things that we're talking about tonight. Now, it comes from a pretty secular, humanist, psychological sort of standpoint, and to kind of put the Christianity lens over it, I think that she's absolutely right. We need to let people just have their choice, react the way they're going to react. And we also need to let ourselves respond and react and live according to the way that we feel in our heart of hearts that God has put in there. But finally, as Christians, we let ourselves, and we let God sort it out. Okay, this is a huge thing for us. Let them, let me, and let God. Let me give you an example. It comes straight from Scripture. Comes from the Gospel according to Luke, chapter 23. And this is perhaps the biggest time that I can think of, one of the biggest times perhaps, that Jesus goes through this. Jesus has already gone into trial or court questioning before Pontius Pilate, who you may know from the Creed. But it says that Pilate asked if Jesus was a Galilean, and when he learned that Jesus was under King Herod's jurisdiction, well, he sent him to Herod, who was also in Jerusalem at that time. Now listen to this, you guys. When Herod saw Jesus, he was extremely pleased and excited because for a long time, he'd been wanting to see Jesus. From what he had heard about Jesus, he hoped to see that Jesus would perform some kind of sign or miracle. And so he plied him with many questions, but Jesus gave him no answer. Can you imagine this? King Herod is talking to Jesus, and you can kind of imagine Herod in his robes with all of his attendants, and Herod was a big partier, okay? You can imagine this huge feast. He invites Jesus in. He says, "Can you perform a miracle for us? We'd love to see one of your miracles. We heard that you heal blind people. Can you do that? We got a blind guy over there. Hey, you've healed lepers. You turn water into wine. Here's a cup." I mean, all of these things, and Herod's like goading him. And what happens? It says that he plies him with many questions. The chief priests and the teachers of the law were standing there vehemently accusing him. Herod and his soldiers ridiculed and mocked. Dressing him in an elegant robe, they sent him back to Pilate. That day, Herod and Pilate became friends. Before this, they had been enemies. And notice what Jesus does in all of this. Nothing. In fact, in the Gospel of Matthew, and in the account of the questioning in John and in Mark, it says that Jesus remains absolutely silent, refusing to answer the questions here. He has conversations with Pilate. When it comes to Herod, what does he do? He lets him. He doesn't have to defend himself. He doesn't have to speak up. He doesn't have to control the situation. What happened next? He was crucified. And sometimes that does happen in Christianity. We do everything right. We trust God. We let them do what they're going to do. We let ourselves live and choose and be. And what happens? Pain. And it's in those moments that we have to let God make good on what God has said. The one that called you, 1 Thessalonians, is faithful, and he will do it. That's what it says. The one who calls you is faithful, and he will do it. Not you will do it. This is where I think Mel comes up a little bit short. He will do it. And he can do it. So the question I have for you today is, how have you been trying to control the expectations and the narratives and the anxieties of everyone around you, but leaving yourself empty as you don't live into God's dreams and hopes for your life? It's time to let them do what they'll do and allow yourself to let God do what God can only do. Let's pray together. God, we offer ourselves and all that we are to you. And right now, we offer the people whose expectations we just can't meet. We lift them up to you by name. God, we release them to you. We don't seek to defend ourselves. We don't seek to argue or any of that. We simply say, I'm going to let them do what they're going to do, and I'm going to let myself live into the good dreams and plans that you, God, have for us. Tonight, give us courage. Because choosing that kind of way, in some ways choosing to disappoint the expectations of others, institutions, God, it hurts. But we live for an audience of one. We live only to please you and to follow you. So give us that kind of courage and boldness to let you be God. We trust you. It's in your name we pray. Amen.